The streets of Queens stirred with the hum of radios blasting Madonna and Springsteen. Kids bounced basketballs, yellow cabs honked, and corner bodegas opened their gates. Inside a modest brick apartment, the Rivera family prepared for the day. Mrs. Rivera shouted from the kitchen, "Carlos, you're gonna miss the train." Carlos, 12, yelled back, tying his sneakers, "I'm coming, relax, Ma." His sister Elena, 11, stuffed her denim backpack with notebooks and a Walkman. Elena said, "Carlos, if you make us late again, I swear." Carlos grinned. "Swear what? You'll tattle?" Mrs. Rivera entered, wiping her hands on a towel. Mrs. Rivera said, "You both better behave. Straight to school, no stops, you hear me?" Both kids muttered, "Yeah, Ma." Down the block, the Rivera kids met their friends. Danny, 13, tall, always carrying a skateboard. Sophie, 12, glasses, obsessed with books. Leo, 11, smallest of the bunch, trailing with a baseball cap too big for his head. Danny said, skating circles. "Train leaves in 15. Who's got tokens?" Sophie pulled out her coin purse. "My mom gave me enough for the week. Don't lose yours." Leo said, patting his pockets. "Got mine, plus extra gum." Carlos high-fived Danny as the group started walking toward the station, chatter mixing with city noise. They reached Queensboro Plaza Station. The stairs down smelled of metal, oil, and old newspapers. A busker strummed a guitar at the entrance. Elena whispered, "It's so loud. Do we really have to take the subway every day?" Carlos teased, "What, you want your mom to drive you in a Cadillac? Come on." They clattered down the stairs, sneakers squeaking. The tile walls were plastered with posters, movies like The Lost Boys and Dirty Dancing. At the booth, a gruff attendant slid tokens through the slot. Attendant said, "Next train's the 7 Express. Don't miss it." Danny joked, "Why does it bite?" The attendant didn't laugh. He only muttered, "Stay in the car you get on. Don't switch." The kids exchanged puzzled looks, then shrugged. On the platform, trains roared past. Steam hissed. A woman in a red coat read a newspaper, a businessman sipped coffee from a styrofoam cup, and a transit cop leaned on a column. The kids jostled for fun. Carlos said, "Bet I can spit on the tracks before the train comes." Elena rolled her eyes. "You're disgusting." Sophie held up her book. "Goosebumps, number 1. At least if we get stuck, I've got reading material." The arrival bell rang. Headlights pierced the tunnel. The 7 Express screeched to a halt. Doors clanged open. Mrs. Rivera's voice echoed in Elena's mind. "Straight to school. No stops." The kids piled inside, grabbing poles, laughing. The car smelled of hot rubber and old gum. Danny skateboarded in place. Carlos tried to hang upside down from a bar. Sophie scolded them both. Outside, the conductor's whistle blew. Conductor shouted, "Stand clear of the closing doors." The metal doors slammed shut. The train jerked forward, swallowed by the tunnel's dark throat. On the morning of October 14th, 1987, 6 children boarded the 7 Express train from Queensboro Plaza. They laughed, teased, and dreamed of nothing more than recess and comic books. It was a ride they'd taken countless times. But on that day, the train carried them further than anyone expected, further than anyone could follow. The subway roared, rattling through the tunnel. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above. Carlos shouted over the noise, "Race you to the end of the car." He darted down the aisle. Elena chased him, while Sophie rolled her eyes. Sophie said, "Boys, you'll trip over yourselves before the train does." A middle-aged woman in a red coat scowled, clutching her handbag tighter. At the far end of the car sat a tall man in a dark trench coat. He didn't blink. His eyes were fixed on the kids, though the train jolted and everyone else swayed. Danny whispered to Leo, "Creepy dude alert." Leo whispered back, "Maybe he's just subway weird." The man's lips moved, but no sound came. Just numbers. 3, 5, 7. Elena frowned, tugging Danny's sleeve. Elena said, "He's saying something. You hear that?" Before Danny could answer, the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the car for 2 full seconds. Screams rose from passengers. When the lights buzzed back, the man in the trench coat was gone. Carlos shouted, "Hey, where'd he go?" The woman in the red coat barked, "Nobody was there, kid. Stop making up stories." Sophie argued, "Yes, he was. He was sitting right there." The transit cop at the far end glanced over, uneasy. Two MTA operators sat in a dim booth, monitoring grainy black and white footage from subway cams. Operator number 1 said, "Car 217 just blacked out for 2 seconds, you see that?" Operator number 2 said, rewinding tape, "Yeah, and wait, what the hell?" On screen, the kids were laughing, moving around. Then in one frame, all 6 froze, heads turning in the same direction, toward the lens. Operator number 1 muttered, "That's not right." When they fast-forwarded, the seats looked empty. Later, when police interviewed passengers, accounts clashed. Passenger 1, woman in red coat, said, "Kids were rowdy. They probably jumped cars at the stop. Nobody vanished, people exaggerate." Passenger 2, businessman with coffee, said, "No, I saw something. Lights flickered, and when they came back, those kids weren't there anymore. Their backpacks still were. Just gone." Transit cop said, "Look, I didn't see them disappear, but the car felt wrong, cold, like air was being sucked out." On October 14, 1987, the 7 Express carried dozens of ordinary passengers and 6 children who would never return home. Witnesses argued, cameras glitched, but one fact remained. When the train pulled into Times Square, their seats were empty. The city had gained a mystery and 6 families had lost everything. The 7 Express screeched into Times Square station, brakes shrieking against steel. Doors slid open with a hiss. Passengers surged out, chattering. A transit cop stepped inside to clear the car. Transit cop shouted, "End of the line, everybody off." He scanned the seats, briefcases, a scarf, even a skateboard left behind. But the 6 kids, nowhere. Detectives arrived minutes later. Flashbulbs lit up the car. On the seat sat Elena's denim backpack, Walkman still inside, Danny's skateboard, Sophie's Goosebumps book, open to page 13, Leo's baseball cap, Carlos's sneakers, untied as if he'd kicked them off. Detective O'Malley said, frowning, "Kids don't just ditch their shoes. Something's off." In the control room, detectives rewound the footage again. On screen, the train entering the tunnel, the kids laughing, moving around. Lights flickered, 2 seconds of static. When the feed resumed, their seats were empty. Their things remained. Operator whispered, "Like they were erased." Detective O'Malley muttered, "Or moved. Somewhere we can't see." Reporters cornered passengers. Reporter asked, "You saw them disappear?" Passenger 1 said angrily, "No, they jumped cars. Kids play games." Passenger 2 shook his head. "No, I saw it. They were there. And then gone. Nobody ran. Nobody screamed. Just gone." Passenger 3 whispered, "It wasn't normal. It was like they stepped into the dark between stops." Uniformed officers searched every tunnel, every maintenance room. Radios crackled. Officer number 1 reported, "Negative in South Tunnel. No sign of them." Officer number 2 reported, "Checked the service rooms. Empty." Dogs sniffed, but whined and refused to enter one maintenance corridor. Handler said quietly, "They don't like it down here." By nightfall, whispers filled Queens and Manhattan. Bystanders said at a deli counter, "They say the train opened its doors into another tunnel, one that doesn't exist." Another replied, "My cousin said a man in a trench coat got off just before the blackout. Then the kids were gone." Old-timer muttered, "Don't mess with those tracks, they're older than the city, built over something else." By the end of October 14, 1987, 6 children had vanished into the veins of New York City. Their belongings remained. Their families waited. And the subway whispered a new legend, that sometimes a train doesn't take you where you're going. It takes you where you were never meant to be. A familiar anchor sat beneath a bold headline, 6 children missing underground. Anchor said gravely, Tonight, New York City is gripped by fear and confusion after 6 children vanished from a subway car on the 7 line this morning. Their belongings were left behind. Their families demand answers. Cut to shaky footage. Police leading crying parents through Times Square station. At a press conference, cameras clicked furiously. Mrs. Rivera, Carlos and Elena's mother, sobbed into the mic. "They were just going to school. Please, someone saw something. Someone knows." Mr. Bennett, Danny's father, shouted, "Stop telling us they ran away." "My boy didn't run. He disappeared." Reporters jostled, yelling questions. Flashbulbs lit the parents' tear-streaked faces. Detectives lined up passengers for questioning. Detective O'Malley asked Passenger 1, "When the lights flickered, what did you see?" Passenger 1 said firmly, "Nothing. When the lights came back, the kids were gone. Simple as that." Passenger 2 disagreed. "No, I saw them stand up. They walked toward the back of the car, but the door never opened. They just kept walking." Passenger 3 whispered, "It wasn't them anymore. The way they moved, stiff like shadows." Detectives exchanged uneasy glances. By morning, headlines screamed across New York. Subway swallows 6. Parents outraged. Mystery on the 7 line. Ghost train. Theories spread. Tabloids ran wild. Some called it a crime ring. Others claimed cult involvement. A fringe magazine even ran the headline, "Trenchcoat Man, Angel or Demon." In a tense meeting, MTA executives argued. Executive 1 said, "We can't shut down the 7 line, it'll cripple the city." Executive 2 shot back, "6 kids are missing. You want that on our conscience?" Executive 3 muttered, "Or our budget." When news leaked that the line would remain open, public anger exploded. Late at night, Mrs. Rivera sat in her children's empty room, clutching Elena's Walkman. The tape clicked to life. Static filled the air. Then faint voices. Carlos's recorded voice said, "We're almost there." Then a cut. Then numbers. 3, 5, 7. Mrs. Rivera dropped the Walkman, shaking. By 1988, New York was divided. Officials denied the supernatural. Families demanded answers. Witnesses contradicted themselves. And beneath it all, the subway still ran, its tunnels carrying both commuters and secrets. Secrets that would not stay hidden forever. By 1992, the families still gathered at Times Square station every October 14th. Candles lined the tiled walls. Mrs. Rivera said softly, clutching Elena's photo, "I feel them here, like they never left." Mr. Bennett muttered, "Every year the same promises. And nothing. They're gone, Maria." Mrs. Rivera snapped, "No, not gone. Taken." The candles flickered as a train roared by. In the mid-90s, commuters whispered to each other on the late-night 7 line. Commuter 1 said nervously, "My cousin swears she heard kids laughing in an empty car." Commuter 2 replied, "Laughter? I heard knocking. 3 times. Like someone stuck inside the walls." Commuter 3 whispered, "I was in a car when the lights flickered. For 1 second I saw backpacks on the seats. Then nothing." In 1996, MTA worker Frank Delgado inspected service tunnels near Times Square. His flashlight caught something strange. Chalk marks on the wall. Childlike numbers scrawled in uneven lines. 3, 5, 7. Frank froze, radio crackling. Radio dispatch said, "Everything good down there, Frank?" Frank whispered, "Yeah, just kids messing around." But when he turned back, the chalk marks were gone. An elderly token booth clerk named Mr. Haskins told a young reporter. Mr. Haskins said, "Every year, same time I see them. Kids in 80s clothes walking past the turnstiles. Don't pay, don't tap, just walk. And then, poof, they're gone." Reporter asked, "You ever tell the cops?" Mr. Haskins chuckled sadly. "They'd laugh me out of the booth, but I know what I saw." By 1999, Mrs. Rivera taped missing posters on the same station walls, edges yellowed with age. Passerby said gently, "Senora, it's been 12 years." Mrs. Rivera snapped, "They're still mine." As long as the trains run, I'll keep looking. Through the 1990s, the case remained unsolved. Families clung to hope. Commuters whispered stories. Workers glimpsed shadows in the tunnels. And the numbers, 3, 5, 7, scratched their way into New York's underground folklore. The city moved on. The trains ran. But the children were never forgotten. The Rivera family sat stiffly on a wooden bench in a Manhattan courthouse. The air smelled of polish and coffee gone cold. After 14 years of waiting, the district attorney's office had called them in for closure. Clerk read aloud, Case number 87104, the subway children. After exhaustive investigation and no further leads, the file will be considered inactive. The words were bureaucratic, but they landed like stones. Mrs. Rivera clutched Elena's photo to her chest. Her knuckles whitened. Mrs. Rivera cried out, Inactive? They were 12 years old. You think I can put my daughter in a file drawer? Mr. Rivera muttered under his breath, You gave up because it's easier. The DA avoided their eyes. DA said flatly, We can't keep dedicating resources without evidence. The words without evidence hung in the air like a cruel joke. The backpacks, the Walkman, the skateboard, what were those if not evidence? When the meeting ended, Mrs. Rivera collapsed into sobs in the hallway. Other parents hugged her, some angry, some empty. The sound of typewriters clacking behind office doors felt like mockery. Years later, the memorial at Times Square station had dwindled. Once hundreds of candles, posters, and flowers had lined the tiled walls. By 2003, only a few faded Polaroids and wax-dripped candle stubs remained. A commuter paused, staring at the yellowed flyer. Missing since 1987. Carlos and Elena Rivera, Danny Bennett, Sophie Klein, Leo Martin. Commuter whispered to another, People still believe they'll come back? Another commuter shrugged. Every city's got its ghost stories. Ours just ride the subway. They chuckled nervously and boarded their train. Behind them, one candle flickered back to life, though no one had touched it. Deep underground, two MTA workers, Ray and Malik, hauled flashlights down a maintenance corridor rarely used since the late 80s. The walls dripped condensation. Rusted pipes clanked overhead. Ray grumbled, Feels like nobody's been down here since Reagan. Malik shined his light. Careful, tracks are live near this junction. They turned a corner and froze, scrawled across the concrete in faded chalk, 357. Ray swallowed hard. Ray whispered, You ever hear the story? The kids that vanished? Malik muttered uneasy. Everybody's heard it. Just graffiti. Kids tagging old myths. But the chalk wasn't smeared. It was fresh. Too fresh. When they turned to leave, Malik swore he heard children laughing. But when they swung their lights around, the corridor was empty. A woman named Angela boarded the 7 line after midnight, heading home from her night shift. She was the only passenger in her car. Halfway through the tunnel, the lights flickered. For 2 seconds, the seats across from her weren't empty anymore. 6 children sat there, denim jackets, flannel shirts, a skateboard propped against the wall. They were frozen like mannequins, their eyes fixed on her. Angela's breath caught. Then the lights returned, and the seats were empty again. When she stumbled out at her stop, she told the booth clerk. Angela said, shaking, There were kids, 6 of them, just gone when the lights came back. The clerk didn't laugh. He just slid her change and whispered. Clerk said, Second one this week. By the late 2000s, forums like Something Awful and early Reddit had threads about the subway children. Posts spread like wildfire. User GhostTrain87 wrote, My uncle worked tunnels near Times Square. He swears he heard knocking from the walls, like kids trapped inside. User Skeptic NY replied, Urban legend, no evidence, just grieving parents and ghost chasers. User Lights Out posted, I rode the 7 in '06. Lights went out. When they came back, backpacks were on the seats next to me. Nobody there. I'm never taking that line again. The thread reached hundreds of replies, arguments ranging from conspiracy theories about cults to supernatural portals. In a small Queens apartment, Mrs. Rivera spoke to a reporter for a local podcast. Her face was older now, but her voice still carried fire. Mrs. Rivera said, "They told me the file was closed. They told me my children were gone. But I hear them, sometimes in the station, sometimes in my dreams. They laugh. Elena had this laugh. It bubbled up, like soda fizz. I swear I hear it in the tunnels." Her eyes welled. Mrs. Rivera whispered, "If the city won't remember them, I will." The recorder clicked off, leaving only the hum of her refrigerator. A group of amateur ghost hunters snuck into the tunnels with handheld cameras. One whispered to the lens, "Okay, guys, this is the 7-line service corridor where the kids disappeared." They placed an EVP recorder on the floor. Static hissed. Then faintly, 3, 5, 7. The hunters froze. One of them muttered, "Did you hear that?" But when they replayed the tape at home, the voices were gone. Only static remained. At an NYPD press conference, officials addressed cold cases. A journalist raised his hand. Journalist asked, "What about the subway children, 1987? Any updates?" The commissioner shifted uncomfortably. Commissioner said, "The case remains closed. No evidence suggests foul play. It is considered resolved as missing persons." Journalist pressed, "Resolved? 6 kids disappeared in public transit. How's that resolved?" The commissioner adjusted his tie. Commissioner muttered, "Sometimes things don't have answers." The room erupted in shouted questions, but the mic went dead. By the 2000s, the subway children were no longer an open case. They were folklore. Families still wept, commuters still whispered, and the tunnels still carried secrets. Official files closed, stamped and forgotten. But underground, the story lived on, echoing in chalk marks and laughter that had no source. The city moved forward. The train still ran, and the children remained missing. It was spring 2019. Midtown Manhattan pulsed with cranes, jackhammers, and the constant roar of renewal. A new office tower project required tunneling deeper than usual near the Times Square station. Workers in neon vests sweated under buzzing halogen lamps. Foreman shouted, "Keep the drill steady. We're breaching an old section of track." Dust clouded the air. When the last concrete slab gave way, the drill bit screeched against steel. A hollow clang echoed. Worker number 1 coughed. "Boss, that ain't a wall, that's a car." Behind the rubble sat a rusted subway car, sealed in a bricked-off chamber no one remembered building. The workers pried the doors open with crowbars. The hinges shrieked. Flashlights pierced decades of dust. Inside, 6 seats were occupied. By belongings, not bodies. A denim backpack, a skateboard, a Walkman, corroded but recognizable, a baseball cap, brim curled with age, a Goosebumps book, pages yellowed, sneakers, laces still untied. The items hadn't rotted. They looked as if left yesterday. Worker number 2 muttered, shaken, "No way. This stuff's older than me." Within hours, NYPD swarmed the site. Then, black SUVs pulled up. FBI jackets appeared, yellow letters stark under floodlights. Agent Karen Monroe, new lead, ducked into the sealed chamber, flashlight in hand. Agent Monroe said, "Seal the perimeter. Nobody else gets in. We're treating this as a crime scene." An officer pointed nervously at the seats. Officer said, "Ma'am, that book? Goosebumps. That series started in 92. This car vanished in 87. Everyone went silent. The next morning, headlines exploded. Ghost subway car, unearthed, beneath Times Square. MTA can't explain. Sealed tunnel discovery, subway children case, reopened after 32 years. Crowds gathered behind barricades. Cameras flashed. Reporters shoved microphones toward officials. Reporter shouted, "Agent Monroe, do you believe the children were here?" Agent Monroe replied cautiously, "We've recovered evidence, that's all I can confirm at this time." A mother in the crowd screamed. Mrs. Rivera, older now, cried, "That's my daughter's bag. You found her bag. Where is she?" Police gently pulled her back as she sobbed. The items were brought to Quantico. Technicians examined them under sterile lights. Technician number 1 said, "Fibers intact. No decay consistent with 30 years." Technician number 2 added, "Time stamped like they've been frozen." The Goosebumps book was flipped open. Inside the margin, in childlike handwriting, were the words, "We didn't make it home." Agent Monroe's blood ran cold. FBI requested access to MTA archives. Old magnetic tapes were dusted off, reels clattering. One tape labeled Oct 14, 1987 was played. On screen, grainy footage of car 217 pulling into Times Square. Passengers exited, but when the kid's car appeared, the tape glitched. White static filled the screen for exactly 7 seconds. When it cleared, the car was empty. Agent Monroe asked the operator, "Has this glitch ever happened before?" Operator said nervously, "Not before. Not since. Just that night." Meanwhile, construction workers refused to re-enter the sealed chamber. Worker number 3 whispered, "I swear when we opened that car I heard kids laughing like faint, echoing." Worker number 4 nodded. "Yeah." And someone whispered numbers. 3, 5, 7. My old man told me that story when I was a kid. Never thought I'd hear it. They both quit the site the next day. In 2019, 32 years after 6 children vanished, the city unearthed what should have been impossible: a sealed subway car beneath Times Square. Its doors groaned open to reveal belongings frozen in time, a book written years after their disappearance, and whispers in the dark. The case was no longer a legend. It was alive again, and the FBI had no choice but to listen. Scene 1. The construction site. It was spring 2019. Midtown Manhattan pulsed with cranes, jackhammers, and the constant roar of renewal. A new office tower project required tunneling deeper than usual near the Times Square station. Workers in neon vests sweated under buzzing halogen lamps. Foreman shouted, "Keep the drill steady. We're breaching an old section of track." Dust clouded the air. When the last concrete slab gave way, the drill bit screeched against steel. A hollow clang echoed. Worker number 1 coughed. "Boss, that ain't a wall. That's a car." Behind the rubble sat a rusted subway car, sealed in a bricked-off chamber no one remembered building. Scene 2. The first glimpse. The workers pried the doors open with crowbars. The hinges shrieked. Flashlights pierced decades of dust. Inside, 6 seats were occupied, by belongings, not bodies. A denim backpack, a skateboard, a Walkman corroded but recognizable, a baseball cap, brim curled with age, a Goosebumps book, pages yellowed, sneakers, laces still untied. The items hadn't rotted. They looked as if left yesterday. Worker number 2 muttered, shaken, "No way, this stuff's older than me." Scene 3. Authorities called within hours. NYPD swarmed the site. Then black SUVs pulled up. FBI jackets appeared, yellow letters stark under floodlights. Agent Karen Monroe, new lead, ducked into the sealed chamber, flashlight in hand. Agent Monroe said, "Seal the perimeter. Nobody else gets in. We're treating this as a crime scene." An officer pointed nervously at the seats. Officer said, "Ma'am, that book? Goosebumps. That series started in 92. This car vanished in 87. Everyone went silent. Scene 4. The media frenzy. The next morning, headlines exploded. Ghost subway car unearthed beneath Times Square. MTA can't explain sealed tunnel discovery. Subway children case reopened after 32 years. Crowds gathered behind barricades. Cameras flashed. Reporters shoved microphones toward officials. Reporter shouted, "Agent Monroe, do you believe the children were here?" Agent Monroe replied cautiously, "We've recovered evidence. That's all I can confirm at this time." A mother in the crowd screamed. Mrs. Rivera, older now, cried, "That's my daughter's bag. You found her bag. Where is she?" Police gently pulled her back as she sobbed. Scene 5. Forensic Lab. The items were brought to Quantico. Technicians examined them under sterile lights. Technician number 1 said, "Fibers intact. No decay consistent with 30 years. Technician number 2 added, time stamped like they've been frozen. The Goosebumps book was flipped open. Inside the margin in childlike handwriting were the words, "We didn't make it home." Agent Monroe's blood ran cold. Scene 6. Subway control room. FBI requested access to MTA archives. Old magnetic tapes were dusted off, reels clattering. One tape labeled Oct 14, 1987 was played. On screen, grainy footage of car 217 pulling into Times Square. Passengers exited, but when the kid's car appeared, the tape glitched. White static filled the screen for exactly 7 seconds. When it cleared, the car was empty. Agent Monroe asked the operator, "Has this glitch ever happened before?" Operator said nervously, "Not before. Not since. Just that night." Scene 7. Whispers among workers. Meanwhile, construction workers refused to re-enter the sealed chamber. Worker number 3 whispered, "I swear, when we opened that car I heard kids laughing, like, faint, echoing." Worker number 4 nodded. "Yeah." And someone whispered numbers, 3, 5, 7. "My old man told me that story when I was a kid. Never thought I'd hear it." They both quit the site the next day. Scene 8. Narrator, voiceover. In 2019, 32 years after 6 children vanished, the city unearthed what should have been impossible, a sealed subway car beneath Times Square. Its doors groaned open to reveal belongings frozen in time, a book written years after their disappearance, and whispers in the dark. The case was no longer a legend. It was alive again, and the FBI had no choice but to listen. Floodlights bathed the construction site. A white FBI tent hummed with generators. Screens glowed with digitized surveillance reels, forensic photos, and maps of Manhattan's subway arteries. Agent Monroe stood over a map, circles drawn in red around Times Square, Queensboro Plaza, and the sealed chamber. Agent Park, her partner, said, 3 decades, no decay, no dust. Whoever or whatever did this, it preserved everything. Agent Monroe replied, or time itself stopped in that car. She tapped the table, the journal page, Goosebumps margin notes, chalk numbers, 3, 5, 7. Technicians enhanced the 1987 tape again. On screen, static bled across frames. But slowed down, something flickered between the glitches. Technician said, frame by frame you can see shadows, 6 figures, standing, not sitting. They're facing the camera. The kid's eyes glowed white in the footage. Agent Park muttered, "They're looking at us." For one frame, blurred words scrawled across the feed, "Stay inside." The room went silent. The FBI tracked down Angela, the night shift commuter from 2006 who claimed she'd seen the children. She sat nervously in a folding chair, hands trembling around a cup of coffee. Agent Monroe asked, "Tell us again what you saw." Angela whispered, "They were across from me. 6 kids. Same clothes you showed me in those photos." The lights flickered. For 2 seconds they were there, then gone. Agent Park pressed, "You're certain it was them? Not lookalikes? Not a trick of the light?" Angela slammed her cup down. Angela said sharply, "I know what I saw, and one of them looked straight at me, like he wanted me to follow." Her voice cracked. Angela whispered. His lips moved. I read the words. He said, "Not home." In the lab, examiners reported bizarre findings. Forensic tech number 1 said, "The denim fibers from Melena's backpack show no degradation. Not even dust. That's chemically impossible." Forensic tech number 2 added, "The ink inside the Goosebumps book? Fresh. As if it was printed yesterday." Agent Monroe frowned. "So we have objects older than 30 years. But they're not old. They're recent. Preserved." Tech whispered, "Or borrowed from somewhere else." Surveillance cameras were set inside the unearthed car. At exactly 12:14 a.m. the feed crackled. Static filled the screens. Then faint laughter echoed through the command post speakers. Technician shouted, "Is that live audio?" The laughter grew louder. Children's voices, a chorus chanting, 3, 5, 7. The camera cut out. When it flickered back, one of the backpacks had shifted to the opposite seat. Agent Park barked, "No one goes in there alone. Ever." An elderly retired MTA worker, Mr. Haskins, was interviewed. He leaned on a cane, eyes watery. Agent Monroe asked, "You worked at Times Square in 1987. Did you see anything unusual?" Mr. Haskins sighed. "I saw everything, but nobody listened. The kids didn't leave the train. The train left them." Agent Park frowned. "What does that mean?" Mr. Haskins whispered, "The tunnels aren't just tunnels. They're older than the city. They run deeper. Some cars don't come back because they don't belong here." At FBI HQ, Monroe opened the original 1987 file box. Inside were Polaroids of the kids, transcripts of early witness statements, and one discarded report marked confidential. It described a transit cop who swore he saw the children walking into the tunnel itself, not a platform, before vanishing into the dark. The report had been buried, labeled delusional. Agent Monroe muttered to herself, "They tried to bury this too." In 2019, the subway children case was no longer rumor or ghost story. Evidence surfaced, time-defying, impossible to ignore. Witnesses swore they saw them. Objects remained fresh after decades. The laughter of children echoed through sealed tunnels. The city had forgotten. The families had mourned. But underground, something was still alive. Floodlights bathed the entrance of the sealed chamber. FBI agents geared up, strapping on radios and blue gloves. Agent Monroe addressed the team. "Tonight we run a controlled sweep inside the unearthed car. Cameras rolling, recorders live. No one separates." She glanced at Agent Park, who nodded grimly. Agent Park said, "If this thing is going to speak, it's going to speak tonight." The team stepped inside car 217. Their boots echoed against metal. Evidence markers still sat where items had been tagged. The air was colder than outside, unnaturally so. Breath misted. Agent Monroe whispered into her mic, "Temperature's dropping. Mark it." Suddenly, the wardrobe knock sound echoed, not once but 6 times in rapid succession. The agents froze. Agent Park muttered, "It's counting." The floodlights flickered, then failed. For a heartbeat, the agents' flashlights illuminated the car, and it wasn't empty anymore. The 6 children sat in their seats, alive, breathing, eyes wide. Carlos grinned at Danny. Elena tugged her backpack strap. Sophie flipped her Goosebumps book. Leo adjusted his cap, but their faces were pale, out of sync, like a reel skipping frames. Agent Monroe gasped, "Oh my God." The kids turned all at once toward the agents. In unison, the children whispered, "Not home." In the command tent outside, technicians screamed at the monitors. Technician shouted, "They're on the feed! The kids are on the feed!" Static bled across screens, then sharpened, 6 figures inside the car. But their reflections in the windows didn't match. They lagged behind, smiling when the real ones weren't. The feed cut to black. Outside, a barricade held back press and families. Mrs. Rivera gripped the fence, trembling. She heard it faintly through the tunnels, carried on the cold wind, Elena's laugh. Mrs. Rivera screamed, "Elena, I hear you. Come back." Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but her cry rose above them all. Back inside, the car shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The sound of a train roared through the sealed chamber, though no train passed. Agent Park shouted, "Everyone out! Now!" Agents scrambled, dragging equipment. Monroe hesitated, staring at the children's forms fading into mist. Elena's voice echoed faintly, "Don't leave us here." Monroe's eyes welled, but Park yanked her arm. They dove out as the chamber sealed itself in a cascade of rubble. When the dust cleared, the car was gone. Only bare concrete remained. 2 weeks later, FBI held a press conference. Agent Monroe read from a statement. "Recovered evidence remains inconclusive. No human remains were found. The case remains unresolved. Reporters shouted. Reporter 1. What about the vision? The kids on camera? Reporter 2. Was this a cover-up? Monroe's jaw clenched. She turned and walked away without answering. A month later, at 12:17 a.m., a commuter riding the 7 line looked up from his phone. For 3 seconds, the kids sat across from him, smiling, laughing, backpacks in their laps. Then the lights flickered, and they were gone. The commuter left the train at the next stop, pale as chalk, and never rode the subway again. In 1987, 6 children boarded the subway and never came home. In 2019, their car returned, only to vanish again. The FBI filed its report, neat and clinical. But the tunnels still whisper numbers. Commuters still glimpse children in empty seats. And every October 14th, the 7 line runs a little colder, as if carrying passengers the city forgot. The subway children were never found. Perhaps they never will be. Perhaps they never left.